This over here is single-handedly the most expensive graphics card that you can buy. And I've got a lot of questions like why, and I'll end up with why not? Let's take a look. What does this ASUS ROG Matrix Platinum offers? And why is it so expensive?
Looking for a cheap way to license your Windows? Check out Whokeys through the links in the video description. Make sure to use the code TN20
to get 25% off. Use your preferred payment method including PayPal or bank card. Go to your orders and copy the key.
Paste the license to the activation settings and you're all done. This license is for Windows 10, but you can upgrade it to Windows 11 for free.
Or you can buy Windows 11 Pro key instead.
They also offer Microsoft Office 19 license. Use the same code TN20
to get 25% off.
Check out whokeys.com in the video description below.
Now, before you start writing your angry comments, I know that there are Quadro cards and NVIDIA server cards that are a lot more expensive, but when it comes to RTX 4090s, this is the top of the pack. Oh my word. Ooh, this might just take the nicest looking GPU title. Whoa, look how thick this is. Look at the thickness of this. This is like an Arctic rad. 38mm thick radiator. Then we have some ROG fans in the front here that are interestingly actually mounted on the back of here. So they go through the tubes into that GPU block in there. So this is a 360mm radiator. It's an AIO. So all-in-one liquid cooler that goes directly to this Matrix. As always, ASUS had to take something and then just make it better than Gigabyte, MSI, and I think these are the ones that provide RTX 4090 liquid cooled cards. This is quite heavy. It all feels like metal housing, very, strong build. There's a dual BIOS switch there. Performance mode and quiet mode. We're gonna keep that at performance mode. We've got our 12-volt high power connector in there. This is the back of the GPU if you slot it in there, or the front of the GPU if you keep it upright position. And that's about it. So what we're gonna do now is we're going to actually test this card. What I wanna know is how good is this card? What's exactly different compared to this card or another air-cooled 4090, for example? As you might know, the 4090's coolers are very, very good already. Now, what does this card offer more than the others? Let's start the testing. So, I have put this RTX 4090 Matrix now through its paces, tested it for creators. It's time to take a look at some of the benchmarks and if this is actually worth it. Now, in order to actually compare this with a graphics card, I took out the ASUS RTX 4090 TUF version. So this is the air-cooled card that is quite a bit cheaper than this one, but 4090, exactly the same specs. So let's take a look. Firstly, in Geekbench 6, just seeing a very synthetic general benchmark for GPUs, which one is better? As you can see in OpenCL, the Matrix, or Matrix, should we call it Matrix? Let's call it Matrix, is about 2.6% slower, which is interesting. Now in Vulkan scores, we can see about 5.6% increase. But again, we still have the question, is it worth the price point? Moving on to Photoshop, and I know no one will really build a Photoshop PC with these types of specs, but let's take a look. The Matrix actually slower. About 1.2% slower in overall scores, up to 4.7% slower in some of the GPU scores. Seems like the benchmarks aren't as good as we thought. Now moving on to video editing in Premiere Pro, looking at the Matrix, now we can see it's faster. Now bear in mind the benchmarks that I've run, we've run them about 5 to 7, 8 times and then sorted out some of the off benchmarks. Some of them are super high or super low and then looked at the average of where they land. And we can see on average the Matrix is about 1.65, 1.64% faster. Now is that noticeable? Not really. We can see some of the GPU effects on standard are 3.3% faster, so now we can see that yes, the Matrix is faster, but I'd say for Premiere Pro, again, seems like it's not worth it. Moving on to After Effects, the news is very similar. The Matrix is about 2.9% faster, RAM preview is about 3%, render score 3.8%, but interestingly the GPU score is about 0.4% slower. So I'd say, again, they're roughly within the margin of error. And in DaVinci Resolve, the results are even more similar. Extended and standard overall scores within 0.2%. As you can see, very, very similar. It doesn't seem like this matrix with a massive cooler and much higher clock speeds actually makes a difference. But what about 3D, where we can really stretch the GPU's legs? Well, here's where things get slightly interesting. In V-Ray, the CUDA scores for GPU is about 4.5% faster. So it is faster. In RTX scores, we're about 9.5, close to 10% faster. So as you can see, now the GPU kind of starts to make sense. We're kind of getting into the 4090 Ti range, where actually 10% seems to be a new tier of GPUs. In Blender, here we can see the biggest difference. The matrix is 11.5% faster in monster scenes, 13.6% faster in junk shop scene, and the classroom is about 10% faster. So getting 10 to 14% faster than the TUF. That's kind of interesting. In Octane Bench, we're about 10% faster on the matrix compared to the TUF. Moving on to Redshift, and here again, that's a bit odd in the 3D. We're about 1.4% slower than the TUF, and bear in mind that is a 10-minute throttling test where we're running the benchmark 10 minutes, and you can see that the matrix on average performs slightly slower. Now this is within margin of error, so I would say they're both exactly the same. If you're looking at the clock speeds in Fairmark full utilization, the TUF pulls about 2.6 gigahertz on the clock speeds. Now the matrix is actually pulling 2.73 to 2.745, so about 150-ish, 130 to 150 megahertz higher clock speeds, which us as creators, we see a little bit of a difference in the 3D, but not as much of a difference in the video and photo editing applications as we might hope. Then we also have the overclocking capabilities of the matrix. And as you can see, we can go to MSI Afterburner and up the power limit to 120%, and then we're gonna get even higher clock speeds, but much higher power draw as well. So at 120% power limit, we're actually pulling 576 watts from the socket, which is very close to the 600 watts what we can actually deliver from the power plug, but we still have plus 75 watts from the actual PCA slot as well. So we've got enough power, but the card is pulling about 575 watts. That is a lot. And you might be thinking, oh my goodness, that's really gonna put this card under massive load and the card is gonna be running very hot. Because if you think 500 and something watts on a CPU, that's gonna be very, very hot. But for this, on this AIO, it's completely fine. We're seeing roughly around 60, 70 degrees at 575 watts, which just shows that the cooling for this is absolutely spectacular. Now the clock speeds, remember we were 2.75, now 120% power limit, we're pulling 2.84, so extra 190 kind of megahertz, which now we're about 240 megahertz higher than the air-cooled car. Now the air-cooled car actually you can push that a little bit higher as well if you wanted to, but that's from the stock settings. Now, you might be wondering, what about the overclocking then for creators? Is that going to make a difference? Should we overclock the card to get even more performance in, Blender or some of the 3D applications? Well, I actually did the test in Blender and Octane Render where we can really utilize the card at maximum utilization. And to be honest, it's not even pulling the 450 watts from the card that the basic stock card is limited at. And when doing the tests are within margin of error of each other, whether overclocked or non-overclocked. So having extra 20% of power will not really give creators any more performance. So I'm sorry to disappoint you in that. One last thing to consider about this GPU is that this GPU does not fit into every single PC case. You're really gonna have to think about which PC case you have to get, because this 360mm radiator is gonna take up, one of the radiator spaces. Most of the cases will have one or maybe two of this. So if you plan to have 360mm AIO for your CPU, you might not have space for this GPU. But if you have big enough of a case, you can put this on the top and the CPU from the front, and you can have actual two radiators in the PC running this. You could put this in the front of the PC case as well, pulling air in, but I would recommend this exhausting out, so it's push configuration from the radiator, which this is at stock put to, so that you're pushing air out. So you're taking the kind of warmish air and pushing it through the radiator rather than pulling the cold air from the outside and then just heating everything else up in the PC case. I think that would be the worst option, and better option would be to just push the warmish air through, which will still cool the radiator and make this run very, very cool. Oh, one more thing before conclusion. I noticed that when I plugged this one in, this automatically synced up with the Aura Create. I didn't even have to open Armory Create. It just synced up, all the RGB was synced up. As you can see, it's all teal for me. The actual ASUS EcoSpace seems to work, so kudos for that. Now, in conclusion, is this matrix actually worth getting? And if you're just wanting the best bang for buck performance, this is not for you. There are the other section of people who are just saying, what's the best that I can get and what's the nicest looking stuff? Now, this is for those people who want a card that you can push absolutely to the maximum, that looks fantastic, then this guy is it. There is one from MSI and Gigabyte as well, but when we're spending that much, I actually like this look the most. I think this is the nicest card. I mean, having this in your PC system, that means business. That means serious business, and I really like the design. Now, I've got a very special idea what I'd like to do with this, and specific PC build with this. If you want to pick this one up or the TUF, I'm going to leave it in the description below. Perhaps check out the pricing for the MSI Supreme X Liquid and Gigabyte Aorus Waterforce as well. I'll leave those in the description below as well. If you want to build yourself the best bang for buck PC though, there is build guides in the description below. Go check them out, as well as Minect link. If you have any questions and you want to reach out to me, I'll always get back to my Minect messages. Thanks guys for watching, and see you soon. Bye bye.